Well, good morning. It's good to be with you here on a Friday. Yeah, we made it through another week, and that's always a good thing. And I don't know where you are, but man, out here on the East Coast, we are enjoying some unseasonably warm temperatures. And I, for one, am always very grateful for every little bit of what they used to call Indian summer. I don't know if they still call that. Is that politically incorrect? But we've had some really nice temperatures lately, and I'm going to enjoy whatever is left of that today before the cold weather, just cold basically starts pouring back in here over the next few days. But it's good to be with you. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're looking forward to a good weekend of who knows, right? Rest, relaxation. Maybe you've got some things going on, but hopefully it's going to be a good thing. We have a prophetic worship seminar tomorrow, now that I'm thinking about it, over in Cranford. So I'll be busy pretty much the whole weekend. So good morning to Jane and Maria and Jack and Donna, Susan and Derek. Wow, thank you guys. Appreciate you jumping right in here and spending these moments with me today. So I want to talk with you today about authority, and especially authority as it relates to the kingdom of God. And, when we first, I think about the idea of authority, I think our picture, what comes to mind, is this concept of having authority over people. If you're a boss, if you're a teacher, if you're, I don't know, a parent, obviously a parent has authority over their kids, police officers, elected officials, there's this CEOs. I mean, the list goes on and on. You can think of many different levels of authority, but I think our first, when we first think about it, yeah, that's what comes to mind. It's like, well, this person has authority over a business or over a city or nation, sort of a thing. And while that's certainly a true definition of authority, when it comes to you and I, it's kind of irrelevant because most of us, are not going to have that kind of authority. I mean, we may have some, but really that aspect of authority is another level that we may get to or we may be in. But what I want to talk to you about is really the authority that forms the foundation for all other kinds of authority here on this earth, right? I mean, we know that Jesus said in Matthew 28, right, that he said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. So immediately we start to see something here about the nature of authority, that Jesus, as the Son of God, he was given authority. Now think about that for a minute. Here he is, the Son of God and the Son of Man. And after his resurrection, he tells the disciples and tells us that now he has all authority because it was given to him. So, I mean, it's a fascinating concept when you kind of dig into it. It's like, well, wait a minute, Jesus is God, and here he's saying that God gave God authority. So, whoa. But honestly, that's how it works. You see, authority ultimately derives from God. I mean, he's the ultimate authority. But we don't get authority except through relationship with him. And if you think about it, every other form of authority that there is out there comes through some relationship. You get hired by a company and so-called climb the ladder of success, and you're given more and more authority, but that authority is being given to you because of your relationship with others in that business and with the business itself. Okay. So I think it's important that we understand where all authority comes from, and it comes ultimately from God and through our relationship with him. Even people that don't, have a relationship with him yet because they're not born again, yet because of their relationship with him as his creation, they have authority. See, we all have that kind of authority just strictly by virtue of our relationship with him as the authority and as his creation, that he made us. And in that making, he decided to give us authority. Now, again, let me shift your thinking here, because we're not necessarily talking about authority over anything right now, okay? Because the authority that he gave us has more to do with what we decide, what we choose. You see, in the Greek, the New Testament, right, when you see the word for authority there, it actually means freedom of action. It means the right to act. Okay. Now think about that. We don't normally think about authority from that standpoint, that if you have authority, you actually have freedom to do something and the right to do something, right? So let's think about that for a moment. Where do you have authority in your life? Well, if you have a home, you have authority to decorate that place any which way you'd like, right? Or not decorate it if you don't want to, right? If you own a vehicle, a car, right? Well, your authority gives you the freedom to either care for that car or not, to keep it clean or not. See, what we're not understanding many times is that authority really is this freedom of choice that we've been given. And it's real, because we have the authority to make choices and to make decisions, and those decisions have consequences. Because God's given us this freedom. We talk about having free will. We all have free will. Well, we can do whatever we want. Yeah, but that really is a manifestation of authority that God has given to us to make choices concerning how our life is going to go and what is going to be priority in our life. See, that to me is the most important understanding of authority that we can have, is the realization that, oh my gosh, if things aren't going well in my life, ultimately it's my responsibility. Ultimately, I have to make choices concerning how my life ends up. We want to blame other people. We want to blame our circumstances and our environment, or even blame God that, things are bad, that things aren't going the way they should. But ultimately, really, we always have a choice. We're never left with no options in any situation. We may think there are no options, but there always are. And the problem that we have is that we're not big-minded enough to be able to see all of the options that are available to us. We develop tunnel vision, right? All we can see is what's in front of us, and it's so big that it blocks out everything else in our life. This thing becomes a mountain, and we just basically get overwhelmed by whatever the thing that we're focusing on, the problem, the hindrance, whatever it is. And so we've got to come into this very basic baseline understanding of authority that we've been given, which is a freedom to act, a right to make decisions and choices about what happens in our life. And even in situations where we feel like we had no choice, okay, we didn't have a choice as to our parents, as to where we were born, as to circumstances that we endured growing up, right? Obviously, there are some things that are outside the realm of our choice. But even within that set of circumstances, there are nonetheless choices that we can make that relate to, well, okay, so now that I understand those things that I didn't have any choice about, right? Now that I understand, I see that, I can take that information and I can actually use it to now make choices that will take me out of the influence of those non-negotiable choices, those things that I couldn't control. Okay. And man, you have no idea how important this is, that we understand this, especially as believers, as sons and daughters of God, because the enemy of our souls would make us feel passive, ineffective, having no ability to do anything about the condition of our lives. And man, that is that's the biggest lie. So we need to understand that God has given every single one of us a level of authority in our life. That authority derives from our relationship with Him. And even if you don't know Him, it's because He made you and chose to give you that kind of freedom, that kind of ability to choose. And so if I recognize this authority that I've been given in my own life, I can begin to exercise that. I can begin to make better choices, better decisions that will result in better consequences, a better direction for my life. And, this is one of the most liberating ideas that you can ever have. Because, again, as I was saying, there's so many who live their life with a fatalistic philosophy, which basically is, que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. It's like God is sovereign, He controls everything, and I have no choice about these things. That is an incorrect understanding of sovereignty. God does not control every little detail of our lives. For Him to do that would absolutely annul and negate the free choice, the freedom of choice, the free will that He designed us and gave to us. Okay. So He's not micromanaging our lives. He is ultimately in control of the grand sweep of history. Everything is moving towards His desired end, but all the mess in between is our responsibility, right? It's up to us to make a difference in those kind of situations. So in the kingdom of God, we've been given this authority, but on steroids. Because you see, in our decisions, in our choices that we make, we get to partner with Him in terms of what He wants to do. What is His will, right? He's given us the freedom to say yay or nay to what He wants. He'll never take that away from us. But because we know Him, we're learning to know more about what matters to Him and what His will is, what His desires are, we can come into agreement with that. And now our decisions and our choices become empowered by His will, by what He wants to happen. And so, we've talked about some of these things in previous episodes, especially around the Ephesians 6 stuff that we just went through, talking about, the armor and all of that sort of thing, right? So, when Jesus tells us in Matthew 16 that we have the power to bind and to loose, to declare, right, that the will of God is binding upon a particular situation, or me, or someone else, if you're given that, that privilege to pray for them, or we're releasing ourselves, our circumstances, or other people. We're releasing that from the grip of the enemy. See, that's an authority structure that we've entered into as children of God. And so again, it takes that whole decision-making thing to a whole nother level. Now, the scriptures also talk about an interesting facet of this. When the Bible speaks of gates, right? God promised Abraham, he said that you're going to have, your descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars, as the sand, right? And it talks about how that his seed, Abraham's seed, shall possess the gate of their enemies. Now, this is fascinating. Think about this, right? In that time, the cities were surrounded, many of the cities were surrounded by walls as protection from all the bad people out there. And of course, when you have a wall, you've got to have an opening so that you can come and go. And those openings were gates. That's what they called them. And in the culture of the day, the gates were places, public places, where the elders of the city would meet. They would sit and they would hear cases of grievances one against another. They would also witness business transactions, someone selling their property or their home or whatever. It would all be witnessed in the gates. So the gates became synonymous with authority. You control what goes in and what goes out, right? And here we see God telling us that we will possess the gates of our enemies. Jesus himself said to us that the church would go forth against the enemy and the gates of hell would not prevail, meaning that we would have the authority to burst through anywhere that the enemy had staked out his authority, and we would be able to break through those gates and absolutely say, no, we're taking over here. And so that's the big picture of how our authority in the kingdom is supposed to operate. This is a literal kingdom where Jesus is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And in his kingdom, this authority that he exerts as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords happens in us, upon us, in our own hearts. We have surrendered and subjected ourselves to him as the ruling king. And as such, we are then able to extend that authority into our particular sphere of influence. And this is where really the rubber hits the road when it comes to authority. We have all, each of us, been given a specific sphere of authority in our lives. It's an area of your life and your existence where God has given you responsibility over what happens, right? Again, the basic understanding of authority is that we've been given this freedom to choose, this freedom to act. And so if in my sphere of authority, there are things going on that are not consistent with or in alignment with the will of the Lord, well, I have now the ability to do something about that. I have some say-so here. It's like, no, you're not going to do that. And so what we need to do is to begin to define where we have this authority. What is the sphere of influence that you and I have been given? And it basically breaks down into very defined circles. The first circle is the one that's most close to you, which is yourself, right? The authority that we have begins here in my own life, my own body, my mind, right? And everything that I engage in. I have to be willing to look at it all and say, Lord, show me where I'm not fully surrendered to your authority in my life. Because wherever that is, that's where the enemy has access, you see. Because if I'm allowing for things in my life that are outside of his will for me, well, then they're in the will of the devil. It's just that simple. There's no middle ground here. I'm either, flowing in his will for my life, Or if I've got these areas of compromise, these areas of darkness where, I'm still kind of holding on to something, well, I'm basically in agreement with the enemy, and he has the freedom to mess with me in that area. So our first area is to really look at our own lives and really ask the Lord to show us where we need to make some choices and decisions to bring whatever areas are still yet not under his authority, still not really in the kingdom the way they should be. Well, let's deal with that, right? Then from there, the circle expands to another layer, which would involve your family or your home. If you're single and living by yourself, obviously, that's where you live. Is there something in your home, and in family as well? It's your spouse, it's your kids. And, if they're not living with you, then you still pray for them, but obviously adult children have their own sphere of influence to be responsible for. But your family would be the next layer of your sphere of influence. Then beyond that, you would be looking at your job. Where do you work? You have a sphere of influence there where you can make certain choices and decisions that will absolutely release all the blessings of the kingdom, will release the authority that you have to keep the enemy from having his way with respect to your job. How does that work with influencing your coworkers? See, all this is something that we need to look at and say, okay, so Lord, I'm working here in this business. I know you want to bless this business. I know that you want this business to prosper. And because I'm here, that's a key as to how the business is going to prosper, because I bring it. I bring the blessing, right? And so you've got that layer of your sphere of authority where you can begin to make certain decisions that will align you and the business with the blessing of God. That's an amazing thing. If you're involved in a ministry, perhaps instead of a business, that would be the same thing. Are you, there as someone that is working in the ministry? Are you a leader in that ministry? It doesn't matter. But that layer becomes an area where you get to make choices and decisions that'll absolutely impact what happens in that sphere of influence. And finally, of course, you would look at a more broad sphere or layer of your authority, dealing with your neighborhood, your city, your state, nation. I can't tell you how far that sphere of influence, that sphere of authority is going to extend. That's something that the Lord can show you, that he's basically saying, look, I'm giving you the opportunity here to make some decisions and choices that will enforce my will over this arena, whatever that looks like. Okay. And when he makes us aware of that, well, then we become responsible for what we do in that particular area of authority. But again, it all comes back down to this idea that we have the freedom to act. We have the right to do something, to make choices and decisions that will bring us into agreement with and alignment with the will of God, and to enforce that. That's really what we're talking about. So I hope this is helpful for you to kind of bring you into a greater awareness of what's possible, of what you would be able to do in simply understanding the power that we all have in our choices, in the decisions that we make, mostly, every day, right? We're making choices and decisions that have an impact either on ourselves or the people around us on some level. So be encouraged. God is so, he's so intentional about partnering with us in seeing these things happen and seeing his blessing become established. And his, the kingdom of God is the kingdom of blessing. And so that's what he's looking to do. So, really spend some time with that. I would encourage you over the weekend to really, have dialogue with the Lord about, where your sphere of authority goes. What does that look like? And where does where does it still need to be brought under this authority that we've been given to administrate, right, into those areas. So have fun with that, right? All right, good morning. Let's see who else we have here that we can say good morning to. Joanne, good morning. Keith, good morning. Francisco, how are you, buddy? Nivea, bom dia, tudo bem? Marie, good morning. And there's my wife. How are you? Bob Rice, how are you, buddy? My goodness. Valerie, good morning. Franny, how are you? Fred and Ann, good morning and thank you. I appreciate you guys jumping in and hanging out with me for this time. I hope it's been helpful for you. So, hey, you know what? Be my Share Bear buddy and let people know. Share the video if you would, please, so that hopefully others will find out about it and want to join us. And if you want to talk, let's reach out, shoot me an email, Facebook private message. I'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts or questions that you may have on all of this. And hey, look forward to being back with you on Monday. Hope you have an awesome weekend. And until then, you be blessed.